Hi, hello! Welcome back to Speeling's 5-Minute Build School. Today we're discussing texture and what it does to help your builds. Some builds don't really work well with a lot of texture and some builds do. Most of the builds that work well with a lot of texture tend to be builds that have more of a singular colour, like granite, polished granite, and bricks, for example. You can also extend texturing down into the ground and have mowed lawns with long strips of colour, or dried grass, or a scruffy area, or have it groomed. You can transition between these areas fairly well, and you can also extend these concepts out into alien landscapes by just changing the colour palette up. Take, for instance, you could have warped nylium, stripped warp stems, cyan concrete, and warped warp blocks to create a really airy alien landscape. You could also texture your cliffs and play with any gradients you have to enhance the height of your cliffs by blending out the gradients. Roofs tend to require more of a physical texturing versus more of a colour texturing. What do I mean by that? Well, think adding slabs and stairs to it rather than strange blocks, like going back to the granite and brick textures. You can do it depending on your colour palette, but the usual colour palettes that end up on roofs don't tend to have the blocks that we as builders tend to use. Also, for those that like to use other tutorials as well, there is a certain convention that has already been hammered into us over a period of time of how to texture roofs. Having a restricted block palette really helps when you're dealing with a build when your block palette could really get away with you and your colours could just go all over the place, leaving you with something that is just really, really busy to your eye. Having a bit of texture here and there to really drive it home rather than having the colour drive your eye can be more calming, especially in an organic build where the lines can be very chaotic and draw your eye in all sorts of places. And finally, deciding the size of your texture patches. Bigger patches will blend in much easier in cliffs or on the ground, as those kinds of things will have larger areas for you to just make them there, whereas smaller patches, right down to 3 and 1 block patches, will end up making it kind of busy. And the opposite is true on smaller builds. Bigger patches, you'll only be able to fit 1 or 2 on a smaller build, whereas a smaller patch will actually be able to make a bit of more texture on the place without having it look too busy. When it comes to having a larger range on it, you can have more colour, but the more colour that you have, the more your eye is drawn to it. So if you go all the way to having, say, amethyst, bone block, and let's go sandstone, then you can pretty much guarantee that it will be a bit eye-catching. But if that's your intention, task succeeded. I would love to see what kind of textures you come up with. Bye!